Hey guys, Ready Freddy here, and welcome to a Dark Souls lore speculation video. I haven't done many of these before, and I realise at this point speculation about Dark Souls lore is a bit old hat. But with the release of Elden Ring just around the corner, it got me thinking about Dark Souls and how I have some ideas from my last playthrough that I wanted to put to you all and see what you think. Now obviously it goes without saying all of these opinions are entirely my own. They are based on nothing but whatever I can pull out of my arse, so feel free to take everything with more than a hint of salt. So, the idea that popped into my head when I was last running through the Crystal Archives in Dark Souls 1 is about the origin of the curse itself and how Seath may in fact be responsible for it along with Gwyn. Obviously not more so than Gwyn, but it's an idea that might be interesting. So, as a bit of background, Seath the Scaleless was the dragon who betrayed his own kind to help Gwyn and the other lords defeat them in the war with the dragons. He was born without scales, hence the name Seath the Scaleless, which made him unlike all the other dragons in that he was not immortal and would not live forever. This vexed him quite strongly, and so when betraying the dragons, he, according to the description in his soul, pilfered the crystal, which he then later researched and used to make himself immortal. Now, we know this from his soul, and more interestingly from the discussion that you have with Big Hat Logan in the top of the Duke's archives, which is what gave me this theory in the first place. Logan explains the history I've just outlined, that he stole the crystal and it's the source of his immortality, as if walking into the boss room and seeing this great glowing clitoris at the background isn't enough to tell you that you need to destroy it. He tells you that if you smash it, Seath will be immortal and you'll be able to kill him. However, Logan also interestingly describes Seath as a true undead, unlike himself and the player. This is traditionally interpreted to mean that Seath is undead in that he cannot die and be reborn. He will simply just not die because his wounds and his body regenerate immediately, and so he can't take enough damage to die, as opposed to the human hollows and human undead who will take the damage to die and then simply be regenerated at a bonfire. But however, this got me thinking whether that choice of him being a true undead as opposed to an undead like the rest of them could be a clue about the curse itself. It's possible, and this is again pure speculation from me, that the curse works in the sense that the bonfires act like that glowing great clitoris of a crystal that keeps Seath alive, in a less effective manner but very similar way. Because the crystal at the back of the battle with Seath, you run up, you smash it, and he can take damage and then will no longer regenerate. When human characters die, including the player character, their body disappears and then is regenerated at the bonfire. These seem to work functionally very similarly, and would explain why when the player character becomes cursed, such as with the attack from the basilisks, or from Seath himself when he uses the crystal attack on you, which was my other clue, by the way, the player gains curse, becomes petrified, and freezes in a crystalline form. It seems strange that the curse should visually be represented as crystals when the crystal that gives Seath his own mortality and caused him to be described as a true undead is also present in the exact same fucking boss fight. Therefore, it's my speculation that Seath, in using the power of the crystal that he discovered from the ancient dragons, or pilfered from the ancient dragons, whichever you prefer, discovered the secret to immortality, which Lord Gwyn then took to use and create a curse which he placed on not humanity, but humans at least, not the concept of the Dark Soul, which is a very different thing, although may well be related. This might also explain why Gwyn allowed Seath to become a duke, to have the archives created in the first place, and to continue his research into the crystal. Obviously the timeline doesn't necessarily add up. We know the undead curse came much later. Well, actually, that's not true, because we don't know when the undead curse came about, or why, or even who personally or actively created it, which is kind of the point of this video. It's insisted, or at least implied, in several descriptions and several dialogues that Gwyn placed the undead curse upon humanity. At what point this was done, it's unclear, but it seems to have been done shortly before his linking of the fire, so that they could then carry out his whole mousetrap style plan of going through the trials, linking the flame again and again to continue the Age of Fire. This could imply that he had this idea in his head from very early on from giving Seath the dukedom, and that this plan was being concocted from then. and that's why he allowed Seath, who, although he had helped them in the war against the dragons, was still a dragon and was trying to make himself another immortal dragon, which you would think, being Gwyn's natural mortal enemies, would be something he'd be less fond of. Also, he was hardly a particularly loyal person, as we know, since Gwyn basically fucked over everybody who ever served or helped him in any way at one point in the saga. So it would make more sense that Seath was kept around and allowed to do his work because he was useful to Gwyn, rather than because Gwyn was loyal to him. This train of thought also continues into DS2 when we see Aldia and in his keep, in which he's explicitly trying to recreate the research that Seath did whilst looking for a cure to the curse. A bit of backstory on him. Vendrick, king, charged his older brother Aldia, who was regarded as a brilliant scientist, philosopher, sorcerer, and is kind of a sticking point for a lot of DS1 fans about DS2 because he is very explicitly made to just be doing Seath again from the game developer point of view. But from a lore point of view, it does make a lot of sense when you think about it, that he was trying to research immortality and the origins of the curse in order to break it, and so he went to Seath. This creates a clear through line from the origins of the curse with the crystals through to Seath, through to Aldia trying to break that curse. Now, DS2 goes into the origins of the curse and the nature of the curse a lot more than DS1 does, which is more focused on the history and the characters contained within it. And DS2 has a lot more links between Seath and Aldia than you might first notice. The obvious link between the two is that he is the weird science guy in the manor, creating all kinds of abominations for the sake of weird science. But it may be that Aldia himself was also a duke in Dark Souls 2, and that he was explicitly trying to recreate the steps that Seath took in order to break or manipulate the curse in some way. The first and most obvious of these is that he's the king's brother, and the duke is the highest order of peerage, which is the natural place for the brother of the king. So that combination's there. But what's more interesting is where he is. Seath created all manner of abominations that we find through the archives and the various other parts of the game, the Moonlight Butterfly being the obvious one. And Aldia is also known to have created a number of monstrosities. Particularly in his keep, we see the basilisks, the giant basilisks exist there, the man-scorpions exist there, the Lion Clan warriors are found there as well, and of course the dragons in the Dragonary, which we would know were bullshit dragons that Aldia created, likely with the hearts of the giants, the bodies of which we find also in Aldia's keep. Now, it could be surmised that these abominations and creations were simply gathered by Aldia as creations of Seath in order to follow his steps, or it could be that Aldia was trying to recreate the steps in the same way and created other abominations similar to what Seath had done. But either way, it doesn't really matter. It kind of shows the link between the two, and that Aldia clearly thought Seath was the key to the curse, which plays into the idea that his experiments with the crystals were the origins of it. The more interesting one that I find is in Dark Souls 2, when you defeat the Duke's dear Freya, who is one of the 4 Great Lords, or Great Souls in that game, which are the 4 Great Lords from the first game, by the way, you're then able to speak to Man-Scorpion Tark, who thanks you for defeating his master, which would suggest that the person who created or owned Man-Scorpion Tark was the Duke himself. And although it's never explicitly said that this is Aldia, if there's one guy making strange creations in this world, it seems to be Aldia. And you sure as hell didn't kill Seath, so it's pretty clear that he's the one who created Man-Scorpion Tark, and therefore is the Duke in the Brightstone Cove Seldora. This is particularly interesting for 2 reasons, one of which, the Brightstone Cove Seldora is overrun with crystals, seemingly quite appropriate for somebody researching Seath and how to break the undead curse. The other is a more direct reference. For this, a little bit of Dark Souls 2 backstory for those who aren't all that familiar with it, and the lore with it. The 4 Great Souls are explicitly the 4 main bosses from Dark Souls 1, just given a different form. We know this because in DS2's New Game Plus, when you defeat those 4 lords, you get the souls of the original bosses in the original game. The Lost Sinner is the Witch of Izalith, the Old Iron King is Gwyn, and, interestingly, the Duke's dear Freya is Seath. Particularly because once you gain the Ashen Mist Heart from the Ancient Dragon, you can also go to the giant dragon body that's hanging in the battle arena where you fight the Duke's dear Freya, and you can look back into the history and see the dragons being destroyed. So what we have is Aldia, who is researching the curse and how to potentially break it by looking into its origins, creating creatures of various different abominations, who is officially given the title of a duke, just like Seath was, and has set up shop in a place that is not only surrounded by crystals, but also contains the body of a dragon and the current home of the soul of Seath himself. So with all of this, we can see a pretty clear timeline for the origins and discovery and interest in the curse. First, Seath steals the crystal from the ancient dragons who he's betrayed. He researches it and eventually finds a way to use it to make himself immortal. Gwyn takes this concept and applies it to humans, but rather than the single crystal that provides your body with infinite regeneration, it is used as a bonfire, which provides the body with infinite regeneration, just a new body each time, rather than regenerating the original body. Decades, centuries, millennia, however long it is, later, Aldia and his brother Vendrick are investigating the curse, and Aldia discovers that this is linked to Seath the Scaleless, begins to look into it, finds all of his crystal research, at least what remains of it, his experimentation with other creatures, understands that it is linked to the immortality of the dragons that Seath was looking for, which is why he was creating dragons himself, and so goes to investigate Seath in the best way he can, which is by recreating his research, investigating any crystalline structures that he can in the Brightstone Soul of Seldora, and explicitly looking for Seath's soul for clues, which is why he set up his dukedom in the Brightstone Cove Seldora. Perhaps he was then trapped inside his own keep by Vendrick, which it suggests as much in his soul at least, because he was then seeking, as Seath did, the key to immortality. Perhaps he was even possessed by Seath in some manner to continue to do this, and Vendrick wanted him to cure the curse, not make himself immortal, although the two, as it turns out, may end up being the same thing. Now, it's explained in the Scholar of the First Sin edition that, contrary to many theories throwing around after the release of the original version of DS2, Aldia did not in fact transform himself into the Ancient Dragon. The Ancient Dragon was likely a creation of his, using a giant soul, as I said earlier, but Aldia himself turned into a giant throbbing pile of shit, to use its technical term, and appears as the final boss in Scholar of the First Sin. Now, obviously, he never found the solution that Seath did, to the extent that Seath found a solution. Of course, he didn't make himself immortal because we fucking killed him. But he does provide some interesting theories and thoughts on the nature of the curse as well as the origin, which he seems to have hinted at in his approach to it. Now, anyone who's played DS2 will know that the big piece of information we're given about the curse is the curse of life is the curse of want. Now, this isn't necessarily referring to the undead curse itself, but it seems to be hinting that way. It also ties in quite closely to what we know from DS1 and the nature of how people hollow out, and the shopkeeper in DS2 is probably the best example of this actually, Moglin, who, as he gets closer to achieving his goal of becoming rich, the more he starts to lose his mind and eventually fully hollow out. Solaire is the same in DS1. Once he discovers the sunlight that he's been looking for, he hollows out. Big Hat Logan himself, who's the founder of a lot of this rabbit hole theory that I've come up with, also hollows out completely once he believes he's learned everything there was to learn about Seath and the crystals. It seems that having a purpose in life is what allows you to refrain from going hollow, and losing that purpose, either because you give up or because you achieve it, is a way to lose your humanity and hollow out. But I think the wording behind that is particularly interesting, in that it's the curse of life is the curse of want, in the sense that to remain alive is to continue to desire, to want more and more, to want something, whether it's achievement in your life, whether it's wealth, whether it's power, whether it's the sun, whatever. But that's not necessarily the same as the undead curse, which is the inability to die, or at least to remain dead once you have died. On the origins of the curse and why men are unable to die anymore, Aldia actually sheds a bit of light on this in the Scholar of the First Sin edition. He describes that Gwyn, who he refers to as the Lord of Light, or the Lord of Sunlight, expelled the darkness and began a cycle of light and dark, which is him referring to the linking of the first flame. This is the difference to the creation of the disparity, which was of course the emergence of the first flame. The cycle was created when Gwyn linked it and allowed this perpetual vacillation between light and dark to begin. Aldia describes that this cycle, this curse, forced men to assume a fleeting form and revert back to their hollow selves. So what's interesting about that is that he seems to be implying that by linking the first flame, that Gwyn reduced humanity from the humans that they were to merely the hollows that they had originally been. This suggests that, at least in my own theories again, before being given the Dark Soul and becoming humans and gaining their humanity, because humanity is the Dark Soul, they were merely hollows, and that's what we see in the intro of Dark Souls 1 as they rise up from the dark to take the souls from the fire. And that by trapping them in this cycle, they had returned to simply being hollows and lost that humanity. Which makes the wording of the game kind of interesting, in the sense that you begin the game as a human, hollow out, and then can regain your humanity or restore your humanity, when in reality it seems to be the other way around, in that you begin as a hollow, which is consistent with Dark Souls 1, because of course when you start the game you are completely hollowed out, at least from a dramatic, thematic point of view here, not necessarily from a specific timeline of your character starting hollow. But you begin as hollow, you then gain your humanity and lose it over time. The difference is kind of interesting when it comes to the curse. Now follow me on this one. This suggests that the hollows are now unable to die because they are now tethered to the bonfire, and their life will perpetually continue so long as the bonfire does. This is why linking the first flame and creating the cycle was the creation of the curse, because so long as they're linked to the flame, and the flame continues, thereby preventing the Age of Dark, they shall continue to be undead. Which is why Aldia then refers to it as the first sin, and why he takes his name as the Scholar of the First Sin for having discovered this. For Gwyn to have created this cycle, because he's now deceiving those hollows into perpetually continuing their own curse by continually linking the flame and allowing this ridiculous vacillation between the Age of Fire and the Age of Dark to continue, instead of simply allowing it to fade into dark, which would then remove the bonfires and the flame from the world and hence lift the curse. Another interesting thing that links the undead curse to the bonfire is actually the description of both the Firekeeper Soul and the Estus Flask. Now, the Firekeeper Soul, as well as the interesting part about the writhing mass of humanity, is that it claims that the Firekeeper is a corporeal manifestation of her bonfire. Now, if we compare that to the description of the Estus Flask, it claims that the Estus Flask is filled with the essence of the bonfire, which we know is essentially the Firekeeper's soul, because she is the manifestation of the bonfire, and that she is there to protect the flame. Now, given that the Estus Flask is a health item, the only health item you get in Dark Souls 1, and the best one you get in any of the games, don't know why they ever got rid of it in Bloodborne, but there you go. It makes sense that if your body is being regenerated continuously by the flame and by the bonfires, that ingesting some portion of that power would then heal that body and prevent your wounds from being made any worse. This is an interesting way to look at it, and obviously we know that there is no cure for the curse. Nobody ever manages to quite do it. The best that you get in the Dark Souls from the DLC of Dark Souls 2 is that you're able to put off your humanity being lost, but you don't cease to be undead at that point. You just have your humanity for the whole time. You don't lose it upon death, which again is different to not being cursed. So, from that point of view, that would make sense with the theory that Seath had originally created the curse by tethering humans to the bonfire in the same way that he tethered himself to the crystal that will continually regenerate them, and so the cycle of linking the flame then allows the bonfires to continue, which causes the humans to remain cursed, which causes them to continually want and to desire to break the curse, which causes them to link the flame, and that is the actual cycle that Gwyn created, and which was the first sin that Aldia was referring to. Now, this is all just pure conjecture. None of these things may be related. It's all just my thoughts. But I thought it was interesting to share with you guys. Let me know what you think. See if you have any ideas on the nature and the origins of the curse. A lot of this, again, is pure speculation, but a lot of this is founded in established lore in the game. So again, this isn't purely ridiculous fan fiction on my part. I hope some of you guys have your own thoughts and your own ideas on this. Let me know if you do. And I am going to do more Dark Souls lore videos, because even though it's not really the in thing right now, it is something that really interests me. And especially with Elden Ring being just around the corner, it'd be interesting to get back into the Dark Souls lore, because I think it's more so than any other game From Software's made, the lore of Dark Souls is something really special. I particularly think I'm going to do something about the concept of sin in the next video, because that's by far the most interesting thing to me about Dark Souls. But hopefully I'll catch you on that one. See you later, guys. Thank you.